Discussing movies that make you want to remodel. I mean, who would have thought you'd tie that in?
Yeah,
here?
well, we can tie a lot of stuff together. So one of the other movies we've been looking at is Back to the Future. And so much of what we're seeing now with modern design, especially in the Seattle market for custom homes and new homes, is very modern. And the whole idea of Back to the Future, going back in history to look at some of the 1960s designs that we're now bringing forward and modifying and reusing is really pretty cool.
What are those in particular?
Well, we did a lot in the 60s when the economy was very strong here with Boeing coming right off the World's Fair. So the space age was very popular. So we had quite a bit of open beam design, a lot of mid-entry homes, which allowed taking that ranch-style home or that rambler home one level, lifting it and putting a basement underneath it that had some daylight that allowed people to expand their families, going from a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home or a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home from before the war to a 3 to 5-bedroom home with 2 or 3 bathrooms. So those homes now we're taking those 1960s designs, modifying them, blowing them up to with great room concepts, taking the walls out like you talked about earlier, and modifying them so that they look much more modern into what today's modern age is looking like.
Rather than the split level with the chandelier when you walk in and 2 choices of stairs to go.
Exactly. And so we can modify those entries, put in some new nice covered entries, and then take out some of those walls that separate the kitchen from the dining room from the living room and make that great room concept. They already had great vaulted ceilings. So that works out really well.
Now, we've talked about this trend towards trying to live bigger, but there's also a lot of, people who are downsizing. A lot of baby boomers are downsizing, and they want smaller spaces. Are there trends or is there movies you can think of where people live comfortably in smaller spaces?
Oh, absolutely. Another great one is Sleepless in Seattle, where they're living on the water in 800 or 1,000 square feet and doing it very well and living very well. And so large square footage doesn't necessarily equate with living well. You can live well in small square footage and live maybe a little simpler and less hectic life.
Does bigger square footage lead to more chaos, do you think? I mean, when you're trying to help somebody time their own personal lives with remodeling, and, I think everybody gets big eyes. You can go on like Zillow now and it's like these houses. Or you go on, you watch TV shows about these huge houses, and everything is like, oh, wouldn't that be great? And you end up with 4,000 square feet, and it's your media room and all these like really nice features. But in some ways, I think sometimes the more you have to take care of, the more heating bills, the more cooling bills, the more repairs, the more maintenance, the more everything, because everything you pack in there somehow is going to need something sometime.
Yeah, and it all has to be paid for. So it's really working with, how does that house, again, a house is an outward representation of yourself, like we've talked about in other shows, like your car. So how important it is to you as an individual to have a large home, and does that really come back and fulfill your goals as an individual? So is it that you want to have high-quality things in simpler spaces, or are you interested in more things in larger spaces? Because a media room, this whole idea of flex space, you can have a media room in a great room, which is also your dining room, and you just change a few things, and you
can a screen that drops down in front of the fireplace.
Yeah, or it's behind a picture. And that we do that all the time for folks, and you don't have to have 4,000 square feet. You just change a couple chairs. So good interior design coupled with good design for your architecture can save you a ton of money.
And that starts to get futuristic. It's not a movie, but it's kind of like the Jetsons. The Jetsons
Absolutely.
live in a small thing, and the kitchen would turn into the living room. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the house would just kind of change.
Right, and you can do that using the construction materials we have today, using the furnishings we have today, and really it's more about us as individuals changing how we think about housing and what that means to us. There's been a big push for apartments in the city of Seattle, very small spaces recognizing that there are certain people that don't need a lot of space. And that's an extreme, just like a 10,000 square foot house is an
Well,
extreme.
it's how they fit 11 million people in Manhattan. It's not
Right.
because they all have large homes.
That's right. And so we in Seattle have been blessed with having good-sized homes.
Brooks Powell joins me. So what are some other movies? I know right now there is a I don't know if it's called a trend. I guess it will end at some point in time.
It'll be a trend, yeah.
Without any doubt.
Yep.
But transgenerational living. I mean, a lot of people are moving in their folks. It's very big in the Asian community as well with the transgenerational living. Any good movies you can think of?
Well, the one that comes to mind mostly is Meet the Parents, where they're trying to bring those generations together, and it's just not working, very well. You have the parents who are driving around in their motorhome, and they're supposedly living the life of retirement, and they have their 800 square foot mega bus, and then you have the young couple that's trying to get started, and they're almost just like two cars passing on the freeway, and they're not really interconnecting, and there can be so much more interconnectivity between generations that we're not seeing. And something as Americans, as we've gotten spread across the country, we're not seeing families stick as closely together, but we're seeing a lot of our immigrant families that are maybe second generation, third generation that have been here for 30, 40 years, much more connected as families.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how does space do that? We just have about a couple minutes left. But you talk about more interconnectivity between family members. How does space tend to do that?
What you can do is if people are
I guess you can't have teenagers because that space won't matter, right?
Yeah, no, well, that's true. You can have teenagers. And what we see the benefit from grandparents and parents and grandchildren all living in the same spaces and having their little separate space, so maybe a small mother-in-law in the basement of a mid-entry plan, which allows them access in and out, and the parents have space of their own upstairs, and the kids can go between floors very comfortably. So it's a great solution.